Good evening and welcome. My name is Fred Kenny, Executive Director of the Addison County Economic Development Corporation. In partnership with the Addison County Chamber of Commerce, I'm pleased to welcome you to tonight's Addison County Legislative Candidate Forum for the Bristol area. The Addison District State Senate candidates, as well as the House candidates for Addison 4 and Addison 5 districts, have gathered here to speak on a wide range of issues and topics of greatest interest to voters in our community. Many thanks to our media sponsor, the Addison Independent. In a moment, I will introduce our moderator, but first, a word from Sarah Audette, the Chamber's Events and Tourism Manager.
Thank you, Fred, and good evening, everyone. I do have a few housekeeping items. First, the questions that our moderator will be posing this evening have been determined in advance based on input we gathered through a community survey. We are anticipating that we will have time toward the end of the forum to invite questions from the audience. If you'd like to submit a question, you may do so at any point during the forum by clicking on the Q&A button and typing in your question. Please identify your name and town of residence. The moderator will pose as many audience questions as possible that we have time for at the end. Second, we are sharing a screen to display a timer to the candidates. For our audience members at home who would like to see all of the candidates at once instead of the timer, you can escape out of full screen mode, set your display to gallery view, and then make the timer screen smaller. In case you run into any issues with your audio, I will post call-in information to the chat. And finally, I will note that tonight's forum is being recorded. The recording will be posted to the Chamber's website at addisoncounty.com and the Economic Development website at addisoncountyedc.org by the end of the week. Now back to Fred.
Great, thank you, Sarah. It's now my pleasure to introduce this evening's moderator, Shawn Oxford, a resident and business owner in Bristol and all-around great guy. Over to you, Shawn.
Well, thanks for embellishing right off the bat, Fred. I appreciate that. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Fred. And thank you to all the candidates as well as the citizens for gathering here virtually and being part of the process. So that's great. I'll start by sharing the guidelines. Candidates will have 1 minute to respond to each question. Every candidate will have the opportunity for one 30-second rebuttal at any time during the forum. If there is time at the end of the forum, we will accept questions from the audience. Candidates will also have 1 minute opening and closing statements. We are screen sharing a timer so the candidates will know how much time they have left. So let's begin with the candidate introductions, 1 minute each. We'll start with the Senate candidates and then the House candidates, all in alphabetical order. Chris Bray.
Good evening. So before I get started, I just would like to share an announcement with folks. My district mate, Senator Harvey, wishes she could be here, but regrets that she cannot because of a situation that came up that demands her full attention at the moment. And she certainly hopes to be rejoining this forum next Wednesday when we have the third and final debate. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Senator Chris Bray, and I want to thank the Addison County Chamber for hosting this event. A strong democracy depends upon good information, and information such as we'll share tonight helps us all cast informed votes. I want to begin by addressing a fundamental question. Why have I chosen to serve in the legislature? For me, it begins with my family. My parents instilled in all their children the idea that your role in life includes giving back to your community through service. I've been engaged in community service since I was a kid. As a teenager, I volunteered at the local hospital. In college, I was a counselor and rescue squad member. My kids entered public school, I became a reading and writing coach. And when they began to play sports, I coached and refereed soccer and baseball. I went on to serve on the town fire and rescue squad, on the United Way board, chaired the county land trust, and as a trustee at UVN. And for 12 years now, I've served you as a citizen legislator, working each day to make Vermont a better place for all of us to live. Service is a way of life for me, and I would like to continue to serve you in the Vermont Senate. So I ask your vote again this year and look forward to this evening's conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Briggs.
Good evening, I'm Peter Briggs, local farmer here from Addison. I'm running because I'm worried about the erosion of our individual liberties, the increasing tax burden. One of the best definitions I've heard recently is that a fine is a tax for doing wrong, but taxes are fines for doing right. And in this state, we are continuously getting more and more taxes for doing the right thing. I don't think a lot in Montpelier really appreciate the ability that the government has to say, give me a share or I'll put you in jail for the rest of your life if you don't pay up. That's a right that should be taken with great seriousness. And I hope to bring more of that to Montpelier.
Thank you. Jon Christiano.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm running in this race because I have an interest in politics. Plus, I felt a desire towards civic duty. In relate to that, I ran for and was elected to a listed position in New Haven. I was asked to run for the New Haven Republican Town Chair and was elected to that office. I successfully built that group up and was asked to run for the Addison County Republican Committee. I did that and served as chair there for 4 years on both committees. I decided to run in this Senate race during this election cycle to demonstrate solidarity with other Republicans in Addison County. And I also wish to give a second name on the ballot to cast a vote for. I entered late when it became obvious that no one else was going to carry this mantle, and I picked it up and going forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Archie Flower.
Archie, you're muted.
Archie, are you hear us?
Yeah, great. I was on mute.
Oh, no.
All right. I think Demetrius started the timer again, so.
Yep.
please go.
Okay, good. Thank you, Shawn. Thank you to everyone at the Addison County Chamber of Commerce and the Addison County Economic Development Corp. For making this forum possible. Thank you to all of the candidates running, for giving yourself to the community, and thank you especially to all of the people in attendance in the audience. Civic engagement right now is especially important because right now our whole country is in chaos, and that kind of engagement is heartwarming to see. So thank you for showing up. I'm running for office because I believe Montpelier has forgotten the fundamental aspect that they are supposed to serve us and not we serve them. They're supposed to actually protect our rights, and they're doing the opposite, including taxing us too much and otherwise. So please vote for me, Archie Flower. Thank you.
Thank you. Mari Cordes.
Thank you. My name is Mari Cordes. I am a registered nurse and have been in Vermont for more than 30 years. I have also been an organic vegetable farmer and an all-around hard worker. I've been a mason tender, can use a chainsaw, and enjoy hunting and fishing as I grew up in the wilderness with my family, or spending a lot of time there. I am so grateful to all of you out there who have worked with me and Caleb and your delegation the past couple of years. We have made ourselves available to you and you to us, and for that I'm so appreciative. Your words and your input, whether it was through a community forum or by email or on Facebook or a phone call, have all gone into our work in the State House. I am a working Vermonter, and that's one reason that I ran for office, and I would love to run again and have your vote.
Thank you. Lynn Dike.
Hi, I'm Lynn Dike. I live in Bristol, and the reason that I am running is because we have no balance in Montpelier, and conservatives, evangelicals, independents, whatever, we just don't have a voice. I have tried to talk to my representatives, and I've gotten nowhere with that. I haven't even bothered this past year. And I have different priorities, different things I want. People are so important to me, my family, people with jobs, people who are hurting, and I just don't think we're doing enough. And I really want to go up there and change that. I want to be part of the solution. Don't want to really fight with anybody, but we need different voices and perspectives up there.
Thank you. Caleb Elder.
Thanks, Shawn, and thanks for everyone tuning in this evening. My name is Caleb Elder. I live in Starksboro, and I have been in the House for 2 years, elected in 2018. It has been a real honor and also a pleasure to serve in the House. This past year was clearly unusual, finishing up on Zoom, but still an important experience that I really value. I serve in the House Education Committee. There's a lot of connectivity there between my role as a Mount Abraham Unified School District Board member. And if reelected, I hope to keep working on issues of education, finance. I think there's a lot of work to be done. There's an important study with the equalized pupil study that came out recently that I think is really fundamental to having equity within our education finance system. And also, frankly, I think we need to look at the burden on property taxpayers in that regard. I'm happy to be here tonight, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. Jubilee McGill.
Hello and good evening. I'm Jubilee McGill and I'm running for state in Addison 5. I was born and raised here in Addison County, and I knew it was the place I wanted to lay down my roots and raise my 3 children. As anyone who knows me well will tell you, I live to serve my community. I had some rough times early on, and so once I graduated from the Vermont State College system, I became dedicated to making things a little bit easier, a little bit less painful for the next person. I spent several years working for the Addison County Community Trust as a property manager, and I handled all of the state and federal compliance in their apartment management division. Earlier this year, I began working for the John Graham Shelter, using my knowledge and expertise in affordable housing to increase housing opportunities and provide support and services to folks at the most devastating points in their lives. I'm the founder of Addison County Mutual Aid, a group that formed in early March and continues to provide much needed help throughout our county. Thank you.
Thank you. Harvey Smith.
Good evening. I'm Harvey Smith, Representative Harvey Smith, and I've been in the legislature. I was first elected in '98, and I served on 3 different committees. The Agriculture Committee most of the time, Housing General Military Affairs Committee, and this past term, the Natural Resources Committee. My history is basically I grew up on a farm. I served as the Vermont State Executive Director for USDA Farm Service Agency. I was on the Addison County Economic Development Board, and I served for many years on the Addison County Regional Planning Commission. I was also a working member on the Efficiency Vermont Citizens Advisory Committee for a number of years, and I also own and operate Smith Family Farm. Families have an opportunity to raise their children here, own a home here, get a noble job here, and thank you.
Great, thank you. And thank you to all the candidates for those great introductions. So now we'll start in on the questions. First question, this is going to go to Lynn Dike first. More than half of infants and toddlers in Addison County do not have access to any regulated child care programs. This continues to be of utmost concern to Addison County residents. One of the barriers to having enough openings for infant and children is lack of job candidates. What can the state do to support and expand the early childhood education workforce? Lynn.
Okay, I don't know what the state can do, but I really feel like we need more private home caregivers. And I think that we need more hours. A lot of people don't work from 7 to 5. We need evening and weekend coverage for these people. We need our family center here in Bristol. It closes when the school is closed. If they have a snow day, they close the family center. And any young kids or whatever that are there 18 months, they don't have anybody to take care of them. Their parents may not be able to afford to pay double, so they stay home from work. That hurts the families and the caregivers. So we just need to have more not professional people.
Great, thank you. Caleb Elder.
Okay, thank you very much. And I've got a landline ring in the background. It will stop soon, I think. I apologize. I didn't think ahead on that. It rings infrequently. I know my clock's running. We have an important universal pre-K program that has worked well in the past couple years through a voucher system to shore up UPK for 3 and 4-year-olds. And I think that age 0 through 3 is where we're really lacking. That's not to say that we're all set with ages 4 through 5. Looking at the whole space of 0 through 5, there's what's called childcare, and then there's also what's called pre-K. In both, people are underpaid, and in the world of pre-K, more licensure is required. So the value proposition getting that education is not as good. We've got to invest in the tech education centers and our Vermont State colleges to help build up this workforce.
Thank you. Jubilee McGill.
I agree with Caleb. I think first we need to look at how we're paying childcare workers. We need to recognize the important role they are playing in our future. And so I think we need to ensure that they are making a livable wage and receiving benefits. I think we can also solve this problem while solving some of our other school funding issues, both in our public K through 12, all the way up through our state colleges. We've seen more pre-K programs, and we're grappling with declining enrollment in our public schools. And I think rather than closing our public schools, we can start offering more services within them to make them sustainable. And so I think we should be expanding our offerings from just pre-K to childcare as well. And we need to be investing with our state college system and creating the next generation of workers.
Thank you. Harvey Smith.
Thank you for the question. This is a great question. It's one that I've followed for a number of years, and we've made a number of policy changes in the state and have seen some ebbs and flows in our child care service, early child care. And I remember a few years ago, we had a program where we put more regulations on early child care facilities. And a lot of the private child care providers actually were forced out of business. So that created a real hole for us. And thank goodness for COVID. If we look at things in a positive light, I think we spent a lot of time this year trying to build the gaps, find solutions. And I think with the advent of COVID here, we really come up with a way to provide quite a lot of early childcare services with some resiliency. So I think we're headed in the right direction on this.
Great, thank you. And by the way, for those at home, if you forget the question halfway through this, or for the candidates, you can go to the Q&A at the bottom, and those questions are posted by Sarah, so they are right there. Next up, Mari Cordes.
As a mom and a grandma, this issue is very important to me, and I know it is to all of our community. And that's my first point, is that when making policy, I think it's critical to listen to the people most impacted, like parents and educators and kids. I really appreciate the work of Let's Grow Kids. It's one organization that's been helpful to us, has done fantastic work on behalf of Vermonters. The pandemic showed us that we can be flexible and that we are resilient. It also showed that the government definitely has an important role in issues like childcare. So we did fund $5 million in 2019, and with the CARES Act provided more funding for childcare and early childhood education. We need to address those quality requirements that made it harder for people to join the workforce. I agree with trade schools and providing a living wage and workforce development for those healthcare or those education professionals.
Thank you. Archie Flower.
Thank you, Shawn. If I'm elected to be your senator, the thing I'm going to help with for the economy is to bring in high-tech jobs. My vision is to bring in a job program that will, or invite business that will create liquid fluoride thorium reactor cores. And this will provide high-tech jobs for decades. And when we have this kind of job influx, we can keep our youth here. We can reduce the number of families that have both parents working. And this kind of effect will let Vermonters help Vermonters. Lynn had a very good suggestion that neighbors do want to help neighbors, and that we don't necessarily need everyone to be professional to watch our kids. We just need to all pitch in neighbor to neighbor, and an economic boost would help that.
Great. Thank you. Jon Christiano.
Yeah, thank you. This is a difficult thing for parents. I'm a grandparent, so I kind of escaped that at this point in my life. I've been through it though in the past. I think it would be very beneficial for everyone concerned, from the children right up to the parents and the employers, to encourage industry providers to provide daycare for their employees. This has happened in the past. It seems to work pretty good. I would encourage the education of individuals as they seek jobs in the private sector, that would provide them with a good career thing. And I also believe that there's no one that's going to care for your child like you. So I would try and find incentivation for people to stay home, and as hard as it sounds, to watch their children.
Great. Thank you. Peter Briggs.
Yeah, I would echo what Harvey said and Jon said. Number one, the state came in with a bunch of regulations, and that reduced the amount of child care providers. That obviously lowered the wages of what people were able to get paid for taking care of children. And also, I do believe mommy and daddy care are the best thing for children. I don't have any confidence that the government's going to fix this. If the Montpelier was going to have the ability to fix a lot of these problems, it had been fixed long ago instead of being cyclically campaigned on every 2 years. I've been running for quite a while, and this issue's been coming up over and over again. Making anything free also I'm not a big fan of, because anything that costs zero will eventually have a value of either zero or near zero.
Great. Thank you. Chris Bray.
Addison County and Vermont more broadly needs truly affordable and accessible system of childcare. And the statistics for our area are somewhat daunting. Pre-COVID, our county had approximately 175 slots for children under 2, but each year 300 kids are born. So there's a population of roughly 600 going after fewer than 200 spots. And 72% of the families with children under 6 have all parents working. So there's a lot of pressure on folks to find good child care. There are centers with waiting lists of up to 20, and the average cost per child is between $12,000 and $16,000, with most parents paying 50% of the cost. So it's we need to make more progress. 2 years ago, we increased the subsidy, catching up a little on inflation, which had lagged, but that's still, we're still behind. We need to raise the rates at which we help parents get childcare. That will help retain quality workers in those facilities.
Great. Thank you all for those responses. Question number 2, moving on here. In May of this year, our state experienced a 75% increase in the number of uninsured Vermonters, primarily due to the job loss in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. What is your plan to prevent Vermonters from losing their health insurance during the future economic crises? We'll start with Jon Christiano.
I'm sorry. I totally missed that question. I apologize.
Actually, you know what? Let me state it again. No problem. John, I should have given you a heads up that you were the first too. So let me restate that question. So the question is this. In May of this year, our state experienced a 75% increase in the number of uninsured Vermonters, primarily due to job loss in the wake of coronavirus pandemic. What is your plan to prevent Vermonters from losing their health insurance during future economic crises? John.
Okay, that's a question I think that's on everybody's mind, including my own. I'm fortunate I have a very good healthcare plan through my wife's employer at University of Vermont. But I think one of the things that would help all of us as we go forward would be a prepaid medical plan. The federal government, I think, has something similar to it, where individuals are allowed to set aside at a tax-advantaged rate monies that can then be used for hospital and doctor bills in the future. I think this does two things. It helps to alleviate the strain, the stress on the public, on taxes, and it also provides an opportunity for individuals to provide for themselves. And I'm old-fashioned enough to think that that provides them with some self-respect.
Thank you, John. Chris Bray.
Thanks for the question. You know, for many, the underlying challenge here is that health insurance for so many people is tied to employment. But we do see that there are government programs that run cost-effective, broad programs for many people. So we have Medicare, Medicaid, and the thing I'd really like to focus on right here is Dr. Dinosaur. So we have done universal primary care for all children in Vermont since the 1980s. It's been a cost-effective program that's ensured that people get timely care when they need it before developing expensive conditions that send them to the hospital. I would like to see the state move from primary care for all Vermont children to primary care for all Vermonters, period. So when the next pandemic or whatever challenge comes along, that people have the security and peace of mind of knowing that they'll get primary care when they need it.
Thank you, Chris. Archie Flower.
Thank you, Shawn. I think when we're discussing healthcare, we really need to remember three different things. The first being that healthcare as we know it, health insurance as we know it, is a product of government action already. In World War II, when the government limited what companies could pay, they had to increase their compensation somehow, so they started offering healthcare benefits. This introduced a warping into the market that lasts to this day. The other thing we need to remember is that health insurance is not actually health care. And what we really want to bring people is health care, not just insurance forms. And to bring people health care, that third thing we need to remember is competition within the market. If I'm elected, I will work to eliminate certificate of need laws, which dramatically limit the healthcare market and the number of solutions offered.
Great. Thank you, Archie. Peter Briggs.
Yeah, one problem obviously is that we have a system in which your healthcare is tied to your job. So I would agree with the idea of incentivizing individuals to buy their own healthcare. That would help cut out at least one of the middlemen. Right now we have two middlemen in the system, the employer and the health insurance company that pays usually in most situations for all the medical care people get. So as long as the employer will pay the insurance premium and the insurance company will pay The doctor expense, nobody cares about what the cost is, and people shop around for what doctor will take their insurance, not what doctor provides the best care at the best price. If we could directly connect the consumer to the provider, we would probably see rates drop by at least half. And I'd also echo that a lot of this was all supposed to be solved the previous decade with things like Obamacare and Shumlin's healthcare debacle. And the government did nothing there of any benefit, as we all remember.
Thank you, Peter. Mari Cordes.
So I'm not surprised at all that uninsured rates went up. And this is exactly why we direly need a national public system that is transparent and that does away with for-profit healthcare companies, including insurance companies and pharmacy benefit managers that negotiate our patient care, our people dollars behind the scenes so that we don't have any control over prices because it's all going on in a non-transparent way. So I support a universal primary care bill, as I did in the last biennium, and will continue to work to reduce the costs as best we can as a state. It's actually a national problem, but I can continue to work on reducing the benefit cliff and the family glitch, and we'll be addressing the high cost of pharmaceuticals.
Thank you, Mari. Harvey Smith.
Yes, this issue has been around for a very long time. I remember about 30 years ago when Howard Dean was governor, is really impacting the individual marketplace. And at the time we did, we were one of the lowest states in the nation as far as healthcare costs go, insurance costs go. Now we're in the top 4 or 5%. So I think we need to go back and take a look at some of the things that we tried to manage, control, put government regulations on to control our costs, because it's worked just the opposite for 30 years. And unless we really bite the bullet and take real actions on looking at market approach, we're not going to reduce our costs.
Thank you, Harvey. Caleb Elder.
Well, I agree with a lot of what I've heard from candidates, candidates on all sides, you know, including what Archie was saying and Peter and whatever. You know, the link to employment is kind of an absurdity. It's the system that we're dealing with, and I think we have to keep our eye on what we can do, because as Mari said, the real fix, I think, is at the federal level. Now, what can we do in Vermont? We need care, we need health care, we need direct care, and we need to circumvent the traditional systems where possible, because the price transparency is not there, the market forces are not there, and we know we're overpaying in many cases. I'm interested where universal primary care and some of the tech education and opportunity for, I think, local clinics and underutilized public school spaces. I think there's an interesting thing to do in direct care and primary care at the state level we can execute.
Thank you, Caleb. Lynn Dike.
Okay, I'm not sure that I know the answer to this question, but I think one thing, the cost of healthcare, there is so much included in healthcare that I don't consider is healthcare. For one thing, I think we need to focus a lot more on prevention and maintenance and not disease control, which that seems to be what it is. And the insurance is very expensive, and we have Health Connect that is very expensive, and there are people who cannot afford to buy it, even though it's supposedly, by some people, it's a great thing. So we need to look at the whole thing. I mean, we need to start over, I think, with a basic plan. You know, what is needed?
Thank you, Lynn. Jubilee McGill.
Thanks. So in my work with the homeless population, I see the negative outcomes of our broken healthcare system daily. The pandemic has made it very clear that healthcare should not be tied to employment, and getting sick should not lead to financial hardship or bankruptcy. Like others have said, in a small state like ours, it's going to be really hard to enact full Medicare for all, especially with robust dental and mental health included, until it happens on a federal level. But I too agree that we can work in that direction by starting with universal primary care. In the short term, I also think we can be leveraging state regulatory measures to prevent insurance companies from increasing premiums, lower prescription drug costs, and we need to be keeping insurance providers accountable for how the money is being spent.
Jubilee, thank you. And thank you all for those insightful answers. Question number 3, and this is going to start with Harvey Smith. And again, for those that want to know the questions, go to the Q&A button at the bottom, and they're all there for your viewing. The question is this: how can Vermont increase its economic resilience and recirculate our dollars within Vermont? Harvey.
Wow, that's a good question. And we really need to find a way to make Vermont affordable. If we're going to attract good paying jobs, we need to be able to come up with affordable housing. If you can't afford to own a home, you can't afford to work here. You can't afford to stay here. First off, we need to go back and look at our land use regulations and see if we can find ways to still meet our environmental goals, but at the same time reduce the cost of the home construction and home ownership. I think that's key to a lot of things we're doing. If you can't afford to own a home and raise a family and have a good paying job, you can't stay here. The business community, for almost all the time I've served in the legislature, had said that home ownership is one of the biggest hurdles to attracting good employees.
Great, Harvey, and just a comment. I know your voice is coming in and out in some parts of that. We got probably 55 seconds of that, but about 5 seconds was blurted out. So I just want to make you aware, if everybody's hearing that same thing.
Which 5 seconds didn't you hear?
That part didn't matter. We got the meat of what you needed.
Okay.
I hope. So next candidate, Jubilee McGill.
Well, I think we can solve, one way we can solve this problem is in also addressing kind of the greatest crisis we as a nation and a world are facing, which is the climate crisis. Right now, 75 cents on the dollar of fossil fuel money goes outside of our state. So I think by enacting like a Green New Deal type policy, creating new energy sector jobs and promoting economic development in our response to the climate emergency will keep more of that money in our state and also be addressing climate change. I think we also need more programs like the Farm to Family program we saw during COVID, which supported farmers. It kept people employed, and it offered really great services to Vermonters. And we need to fight the USDA to bring that contract back into Vermont.
Great, thank you. Mari Cordes.
Great question, and it's one of the things that I'm most optimistic about, because we've already proven in extreme weather events and in this pandemic that we have a baseline, we have foundational resilience in our communities. We saw how people came together at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's still ongoing. The pandemic didn't create any of these economic problems, though, like affordable housing. They just exacerbated it. One of the issues is wealth inequity, and I'm already starting to draft legislation to try to address that in Vermont. We need tax fairness. Other things I would use, and I think I would follow the example of the people actually doing it locally. I'm so proud of our community. We're transitioning to producing our own Vermont energy. I also support supports for diversified local farms and food production, broadband and technical support for businesses to adapt to new retail models, and affordable places to live.
Great, thank you. Lynn
That
Dike.
minute is really short.
It is.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. How can Vermont increase its economic resilience and recirculate our dollars within Vermont?
Okay, well, I'm going to answer totally different from anybody else, but I think we need to start when our kids are in school. I think we need to have a lot more classes or whatever, character building, whatever, teaching how to budget, how to use their money. They're not getting that. And people, I think there is so much debt that we have. I think we need to help people figure out how they're going to get out of debt. I think most of us have been in a situation where we have had to get ourselves out of a mess. I think we can say we can have this or we can have that, but we can't have both. I think we're not making choices. So, well.
Well, thank you, Lynn. Caleb Elder.
Thanks. I do think that the response to the climate crisis and the business opportunities, frankly, that go along with that response are real for Vermont. We've already seen that in the renewable energy world. I have worked in renewable energy development since early 2008 and really saw some of the dramatic growth of the solar business in Vermont. And a lot of that was because of a strategic regulatory approach, of course, coupled with some incentives at the federal level, but strategic regulation that gets out of the industries that are doing what we want to see done is critical. And, you know, the renewable energy industry is a little damped down now, but over the years, I've worked with a lot of traditional construction businesses, companies that are already in Vermont looking for business opportunities. So as we look at the electrification of our transportation sector and other renewables, a lot of changes in that sector, I think it's really promising for our state.
Thank you. Peter Briggs.
Yeah, two things that are a serious hurdle in this state, and as somebody who works in industry and business, I know, is, as I said, taxes, which is fines for doing right. We keep getting more and more fines for doing the right thing, and also regulation. Studies have found that states with a high tax burden but a low regulation are actually better to do business in than states with low taxes and a high regulatory burden. Because at least taxes, you can spend it on something useful like infrastructure, and so the dollars come around. Regulation, if burdensome, they'll either discourage people from doing business or outright shut them down from doing business. And we've seen a lot of contraction of the business sector in this state because people have said, well, I can't do it anymore. And you're not going to get new ones coming in if they say, I can't start up here. So it's the silent killer of business that nobody likes to talk about because everybody thinks that they're going to die if we deregulate. But there are ways of deregulating that doesn't endanger people's health and life and liberty.
Thank you. Archie Flower.
Thank you, Shawn. I can't think of anything that would boost our economic resilience more than 100% energy independence. And we can combine that goal with many of our colleagues have already mentioned climate change and fighting that. And liquid fluoride thorium reactors allow us to do both because they will allow us to create our own synthetic fossil fuels as we create more electric. So we don't have to get rid of our old infrastructure right away. We can do a smoother transition. This would allow us to not only become leaders in this for the nation, but leaders worldwide and actually solve climate change.
Thank you. Jon Christiano.
Sorry, I keep forgetting to unmute my mic. I have a somewhat different approach on this, but it's not really. I'm a big proponent of bringing industry to Vermont in the form of small businesses that can be spread out across the state. It would take some of the stress off. Moving people and goods back and forth around the state environmentally, to be the kind of jobs that would encourage people to come here: small engine assembly, injection molding, electric circuit board assembly, computer assisted milling and lathe machining. Locate them in small towns with transportation facilities to reduce worker travel, and raw finished product transportation that could reduce multiple challenges for the state and the populace at the same time.
Great, thank you. Chris Bray.
Thanks, Shawn. This is a great question. You know, there's only one Vermont, and when we celebrate our unique strengths, when we pull together, we position ourselves for our strongest, best economic future. Even in the midst of COVID, we've seen people pulling together and seen our industries, local industries, grow. So through what am I talking about in terms of examples? Through the Farm to Plate program, which I started a decade ago, Vermont has grown a more diverse and sustainable food and agricultural economy. In a similar way, working as chair of Senate Natural Resources and Energy, working with my colleagues, we've developed a clean energy economy that helps with renewable energy generation, weatherization, energy efficiency. We're working with trails folks to develop the outdoor recreation industry. So we've seen in the last decade, 26,000 new jobs, 842 new businesses, over 110 million in farm gate receipts. We've been able to grow an economy that's homegrown and resilient.
Great, thank you. All right, and just a reminder to all of you viewing and listening out there, if you have a question, the last couple questions are going to come from you. So please punch those in the chat button at the Q&A button below. So feel free. All right, fourth question. This will be first posed to Archie Flower. And the question is this: we received numerous questions about systematic racism through our community survey, and it was challenging to pick just one. If elected, what will you do to represent marginalized communities in our district? Archie.
This is really a hard-hitting and excellent question. And growing up in Middlebury, it tore me to hear of stories of people doing hate graffiti around town. And even though even though I don't live there now, just hearing that just tore me apart. And racism is one of the most disgusting stains on the human condition. If we were to eliminate the war on drugs, we would eliminate a massive amount of the system that is already geared towards harming people on the lower end of the economic system. And it separates families, it destroys lives, and it's a war on the Bill of Rights, and it's a war on the people. Just end that.
Thank you, Archie. Jon Christiano.
Okay, remember the button this time. Thank you very much. That is the question of the day, not only in Vermont, but nationwide. I'm not a native Vermonter, but I've lived here a long time, since 1968. I've never really encountered, and I'm not going to apologize for being white. I am. That's the way God made me. That's the way I am. But I have not recognized any real racism in Vermont. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It's just that I haven't been part of it or part of it. I don't know what systemic racism even means. I've asked several people, I'm not sure they've ever come up with a reasonable explanation to me, but I think we should. Here's an example. Somebody says Black Lives Matter, that we should love black people. I love black people, but they don't love me. All of a sudden, if I mention anything about anything other than Black Lives Matter, I'm subject to being beat up or not treated nicely. I'm not sure how that equates.
Thank you. Peter Briggs.
Our founding fathers had the answer to this back in 1776 when they brought forth the radical idea that everybody was equal under the law. And it took a while for us to get there, but along the way, 2 wars later, a lot of white men died for that ideal to be preserved and extended to everyone. If the government wants to end racism, then it's important they treat everybody equally under the law. No favoritism for any class. That's the answer to racism.
Thank you. Chris Bray.
As a member of the Senate Government Operations Committee, I've worked to help Vermont hire, empower, and fund the director of the racial equity team at the state of Vermont. And as events of this year have highlighted all the more clearly, we need to aspire not just to be non-racist, but we have to rise to becoming anti-racist. That is, actively identifying and overcoming the systematic racism that consistently leads to higher rates of poverty and injustice for Americans who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. This year, we're focusing on laying the foundations for broader work throughout government, municipal, and state by collecting data that will help us be well informed about where the problems exist and how to address them. One of the main things I've learned in terms of working with this community is the saying, nothing for me without me. So engaging this community in this work firsthand is essential.
Thank you. Jubilee McGill.
Yes, I'm glad this is part of the discussion tonight. I think first we need to listen and not just say, well, I haven't seen it. Listen to the people who are experiencing it and recognize their voice and their experience. And then I will continue to speak up and speak out about the hate that is very pervasive and present even here in our county. I will look at everything through the lens of all of our different marginalized communities and how this will affect them. I will get their feedback. What issues do they see with this, and how can we repair harm while also tackling all of the other issues we as a state are facing? And then I will support policies that also repair harm, raising the wage, paid family and medical leave, the climate crisis. Marginalized people are the ones who are most affected by these policies, so I will lift up these communities by supporting them.
Thank you. Caleb Elder.
Overt racism is easy to spot, and I think it's common for many of us to be raised to push that away and to declare that we are not that. I think when you start to understand a little more the role that white privilege plays, and also just on the subtlety of systemic racism, especially viewed as a white person, you start to appreciate that's not really what we're talking about. We talk about systemic racism. And I think it's really important to just acknowledge that the rules have been different over the years, and we should just acknowledge that. And we should use that as a lens for all future policy to say, is there an opportunity here for policy reform? Is there an opportunity for reparative investment? And to just, like with climate change now, just get over it, admit that it exists, that our founding fathers were slaveholders, and get on towards pursuing their ideals, not their actions.
Thank you. Harvey Smith.
Yes, this is a difficult question. It's one that goes back a long time. Even before our founding fathers, we had a system of slavery in the United States. It was different than any other country, as I understand it, and we treated, that class of individuals differently and under quite a lot of duress. And I think one way to address it, I agree with a statement that Peter Briggs had said, founding fathers said it, we're all created equal. We haven't been living up to that. We need to find a way. And I think something to demonstrate that is build a statue. We've been tearing statues down. That's what's going on in the country right now. But, our Washington, D.C., our capital of the United States, was built primarily by slave labor. And I think we ought to recognize that with some kind of tribute to the people that lived in and did the work down there. Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn, Dike.
Okay, well, I think I agree with Peter. We are all created equal. We all have abilities and skills and all of that. We should be, if our character, whatever, people are going to like us or not like us or whatever. But I don't know, in the past, we can't do anything to change the past. We can change the future, and we need to not tolerate racism in any form. And I feel like sometimes the pendulum has swung so far that it's got to go back, where everybody again is in this. We're all in this together. Let's be together, not fight.
Thank you. Mari Cordes.
We can't all be in this together until we truly are in all of this together. And yes, the past is the past, and it laid a solid foundation for a system that continues to oppress Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as other marginalized communities. I was raised, as we all were, in a white dominant culture. We can't escape it. We can't pretend it doesn't exist, and it doesn't help. It actually hurts when we pretend it doesn't exist. I am working to be anti-racist, but it doesn't mean that I don't think or say racist things. Sometimes I do. So it starts, as Jubilee said, with us listening to the people that are impacted, doing our own personal work, seek out opportunities like working with Surge, and as policymakers, making sure that the people of those communities, of BIPOC communities, are leaders in policymaking in our communities. Ignoring it just makes it worse.
Great, thank you. So we're about halfway through and right on time, so great job to the candidates, thank you. The next question, question number 5, is going to be posed to Jubilee McGill first, and the question is this. In August, the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources announced that agriculture has achieved 11% of the agricultural phosphorus reduction requirements in the Lake Champlain Phosphorus Reduction Plan. What can the state do to ensure that farmers continue to implement conservation practices that protect soil health and water quality? Jubilee.
So I think in the water quality kind of discussion, farmers have often been made out to be the villains. And I think we spent a lot of time kind of arguing and, they're doing this wrong, or the municipalities are doing this wrong. And we're so busy kind of yelling at each other that nothing has been done. And I think the most important thing we can do is we need to help our farmers. We need to support our farmers. We need to provide financial assistance to our farmers to continue to invest in sustainable practices. Farming is our heritage. It's part of what tourists come to see, and so we need to be putting the money into our farms to make it possible.
Great, Jubilee, thank you. Harvey Smith.
Yes, this is a really great question, and it's one that I'm really proud to say the farmers have really stepped up to the plate in addressing water quality related issues. I know when we passed the bill, we said we were all in. The agriculture community, we formed a group down here, the Champlain Valley Farmers Coalition, and they really took it to heart to come up with practices and cultivation practices and reduced tillage practices that really have helped in this direction. And I'm very proud of the work that they've done. I've done a lot of the same work here on my own farming operation over the years. And it was quite nice to see that for the last 3 years, agriculture had, by the sector of agriculture, had reduced more phosphorus than any other sector in the state. Matter of fact, this past year, ANR's report
We lost you there, Harvey.
percent of reduction of phosphorus.
Harvey, thank you. Mari Cordes.
Thank you. I agree. We need to continue supporting the amazing farm and food production businesses in Addison County. We're very wealthy in that sense. We need to support regenerative agriculture. NOFA Vermont has a list of recommendations about how to support our local farmers, and I agree with those recommendations. I also think that it would be helpful to continue to try to have cooperative and regional food processing facilities that small farms and food producers can use and reduce overhead costs.
Great. Thank you, Mari. Lynn, Dike.
Well, I'm listening to this and I really don't have much to add to that. These are great suggestions. I do want to make sure that the farmers know they are appreciated for all that they've already done. And, you know, I hope they're seeing benefits from it, and, you know, they're wanting to do it. And well, I guess that's it. Nothing to add.
All right. Thank you, Lynn. Caleb Elder.
I do think that the reductions announced by ANR are encouraging. And at this point, I don't think the state needs to do anything additional. It seems like that the conservation practices are being implemented. I do think the general picture for dairy in Vermont does not look very promising lately. We know that, and it's a concern. And so presumably to keep implementing these practices, these operations have to stay afloat. And understanding the new food markets that are going to exist. And we've seen such dramatic change over the last 6 months. I'll run out of time before even coming close to summing it up. But I think suffice it to say that these are real food resources in our state, and we need to value them accordingly. And I'm pleased to see that the phosphorus levels are coming down.
Great. Thank you, Caleb. Jon Christiano.
Yes, thank you. Addison County, Vermont, and Addison County in particular is a farm community. We need to support farmers in every way that we possibly can. And I think one of the ways that we can support them is to encourage our legislators to turn away from what I feel is an unreasonable targeting of Vermont farmers for the phosphorus load that's going into the lake. There's 3 other areas that contribute heavily to this. One is New York State and the other is Quebec. But Vermont seems to be the only ones that are bearing the burden for this on a per parcel cost spread across the state. And my thought is that a parcel owner on the Connecticut River shouldn't share any more in the burden of that prorated than somebody who lives in Buffalo, New York. It just isn't reasonable. The idea that they were sued in a different court is ridiculous.
Thank you, John. Chris Bray.
This is a great question, especially for Addison County, which a lot of us like to call the home of, milk and honey, the land of milk and honey. It is true that farms have been the primary source of phosphorus emissions, and that's why we've appropriately brought a lot of attention to it. I'm proud of the work that we did in our committee back in 2015 in the Vermont Clean Water Act, where we developed full funding at scale. Roughly now $30 million a year flows through to help farmers that want to reduce phosphorus and runoff through practices, innovative practices. We also added soil health as a criterion to the design programs. So as we see people doing cover cropping, riparian buffers and more, we're seeing phosphorus reduction diminishing. We're on the right track. There's more to do for sure. I think there's a healthy relationship between the state and farmers in terms of trying to do the right thing.
Thank you, Chris. Peter Briggs.
I'm not surprised that we've seen this number because farmers have been working on improving our pollution levels for decades, and every decade we've gotten better. But to help things, I see a part 2 of this, and that reduction isn't going to be enough because ag and forestry are the only 2 sectors I can think of that have a use for phosphorus. Everybody else has no use for it while they're emitting it, municipal sewers, roads, so on. So the second part of this is going to have to be figuring out how to redivert those phosphorus streams into areas that can be used, mainly ag and forestry. And I also like to say it's important that we have a understanding and flexible regulatory agency. I really got to give Incentivis credit for extending the manure spreading deadline last year. It was the right move. We got it on the fields instead of it running out of the ponds, and we saw very little impact this spring. If you're going to have pollution, it's much better to have it over the winter when it's going to run out and not be a problem versus in the spring when it's going to create an algae bloom when the temperatures rise.
Thank you, Peter. Archie Flower.
Thank you, Shawn. We do have some farmers amongst the candidates here tonight. I am not one of them. And that's one of the interesting things is that the legislature used to contain a whole lot more farmers, and now it contains very few. And I think that's an unfortunate disconnect. And I think that Montpelier wants to micromanage farms, and I totally disagree with that way they're going about it. I think that farmers should be the ones that decide how they farm because they know how to farm. They also love the land. They love Vermont, just like every Vermonter does. And I would work to get Montpelier off of their backs.
Great. Thank you, Archie. So that is the last predetermined question that we have one more actually, and then we're going to have audience participation with questions. So what I wanted you to do is please submit those questions under the Q&A button and identify your name and your town and your question, because this is the 6th of 8 questions. And this next question will go to Peter Briggs first. And the question is this: COVID-19 has underscored and amplified the challenges of food security in Vermont. Throughout the summer, Vermonters experiencing food insecurity waited in long lines for hours to receive commodities boxes through the USDA Farmers to Families program, which will continue through the fall. What can the legislature do to support Vermonters experiencing food insecurity to obtain food in a more sustainable and dignified way? Peter.
Yeah, thank you. One thing is it's important for Montpelier to understand that those of us in the ag industry are not interested in killing our customers. It's very important. Otherwise, you don't have a business if you don't have customers. So it's important for them to realize that 90% of the producers out here are interested in producing a good product, 99%. And if we directly connect producers to the consumer, that percentage that doesn't give enough care to the safety of the food are going to be quickly gone because people aren't going to be buying from them. So Montpelier doesn't need to come in with a whole lot of regulations stopping the direct connection of farmers to consumers. And there needs to be a lot more of that, I agree. We need a lot more butchers in the state There's no reason for people to have to go hungry. More on-farm processing would be good, and taxes and regulations could be a real hurdle to that. And so that's one thing.
Thank you, Peter. Jon Christiano.
Food insecurity and dignified access. There's a lot of programs available to individuals and families that are short on funds, especially now during the pandemic, and job insecurity, probably as much or more than food insecurity. They're directly related. We can all reach out to our neighbors. We know probably as well as any government bureaucrat who in our community, friends and neighbors, it needs a helping hand. I'm a firm believer in that aspect, more in another government-run program. I'm always on the lookout, my wife and I, for someone that we can help, and we're happy and anxious to do that.
Thank you, Jon. Archie Flower.
Thank you, Shawn. This question goes directly again to economy, as so many questions do, doesn't it? As Jon Christiano said, job security and food security go hand in hand. And this also reflects back on the last question about farming. And if we stop micromanaging farms and allow farmers to grow what they want, and if we actually get out of the way of the economy with too many property taxes, too much of an anti-business climate, I think Vermonters are more than self-sufficient when they're allowed to actually do what they want to do and produce what they want to produce and work where they want to work, or create new businesses for themselves and their families.
Great. Thank you, Archie. Chris Bray.
We talked about how a strong economy is the foundation for being able to provide for yourself. And I want to come back to Farm to Plate again, which a program I started in 2009. Since then, we diversified agriculture by shifting our attention to food and creating direct relationships with appreciative customers who value their farmers and pay fair prices, not those dictated by the federal system. And today we recognize and support local milk, butter, cheeses, ice creams, fruits, vegetables. We have vineyards and wineries now, orchards making and cider makers, grain and hop production for brewing, distilling and baking, hemp and biomass for energy and fiber, nurseries and greenhouses, honey, maple syrup, beef, chicken, pork, and 1,000 more bright spots. So I really have seen, and in the last decade, a renaissance in agriculture by its shifting to growing food locally for more local people.
Thank you. Caleb Elder.
Yeah, I think Senator Bray is so right that the evolution of the local foods kind of system, which has existed, of course, for decades and centuries, but has really been diversified and enriched over the last couple decades in Vermont, gives us an opportunity to augment systems like in our local schools, where we do really important food service programs. And during COVID, those programs, though they have, traditionally many of them, including in the district, the MEUSD district, just wonderful programs to have local foods, they also get federal funding. The example of the people waiting in line for these cardboard boxes is in stark comparison to the bus drivers who carefully brought and stored in coolers lunches for kids all through the summer and the fall. So we need to encourage our federal delegation to support the federal programs that we want to see, and then also do our work here in Vermont.
Thank you, Caleb. Lynn, Dike.
Okay. I think, one thing is, like I think Jon said, we neighbors help each other. I mean, there's a lot of faith-based programs that could be helping. And I know there are a lot of regulations that prevent that. I myself have tried to give food and to, well, the nursing home I worked at, and they couldn't take it for whatever reason. And I think, you know, we need to kind of stop that, but I don't know. I don't know about the programs that we have available, like Chris does. They all sound really good to me, and we need to keep doing it and let people do what they can do to help each other also.
Great. Thank you, Lynn. Mari Cordes.
I will continue to do whatever I can to support the amazing food, farm and food producers that we have in Addison County. And having been an organic farmer myself, I know how challenging this work is. We have a lot to be proud of when we consider the numbers of farms and dairies and food producers in Vermont. So I'm committed to continuing to support them and follow their lead on what they need, and including the NOFA Vermont recommendations, which NOFA is a membership organization of farmers and food producers. I do believe that we need to support also the local and regional marketing, processing, and distribution. We do need more butchers, more safe food handling. And then we could build up more state and regional cooperatives and local cooperative agreements. Everyone Eats was a program that started in Vermont to help food insecure individuals, and that was funded by CARES money. We've seen how mutual aid, including Meals on the Bus, worked to help, and we need to continue to support Farm to School, elders. Local food does go to my hospital, University of Vermont Medical Center, so that is already a possibility. There's so much more to say, but I think, again, that's one of the things I'm most optimistic about.
Thank you, Mari. Jubilee McGill.
I am all in for what Chris Bray and Mari said. One program where I think we can really increase decrease food insecurity in a more sustainable and dignified way is expanding the program that allows people to use their 3 squares benefits at farmers markets and help our local farm stands invest in the technology to also be able to accept those 3 squares benefits. And then also for people who like the food that was delivered on the bus. I work with a lot of people who have transportation issues or are limited in their mobility. So we also need to increase opportunities to get food directly to them.
Great, Jubilee, thank you. Harvey Smith.
Yes, I want to thank Chris Bray for starting it off with some of the programs that we have out there. And I know that a lot of the local beef producers were providing meat to the local school systems. And when COVID came along, well, that dried right up. There wasn't any more sales, institutional sales, they just disappeared. But then we started seeing quite a lot of interest, and people wanted to make sure they had food in their freezer. So a lot of the local producers have done very well this year with filling that market. And we still have orders coming in for next year as well. So we're in good shape. But some of the infrastructure is limiting us in our ability to reach out and fill that market in large volumes. So we still do, but for the local direct sales meat producers, we've done well.
Great, Harvey, thank you very much. Well, that is the predetermined questions that we have so far. And if this were a baseball game right now, we'd all be singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," but I didn't get that approved, so we will forgo that. So the next question it's coming from an audience member. And the first one to answer this, please, is Mari Cordes. And the question comes from Robert Burton. And the question is this. He asks, Cal Thomas coined the term systematic racism. And Thomas Sowell says there is no such thing. It is meaningless. Both men are Black. How do you respond to that?
I will not be able to comment on the thoughts of someone else who I've never had a conversation with. But I can say that, as I said earlier, systemic racism is imbued in all of our psyches, whether we're white, Black, Indigenous, or people of color. So it impacts all of us and the way that we think, whether we're aware of it or not. So the most important thing that we can do as individuals is to explore how it has impacted our mindset and the way that we perceive the world around us, and what have we forgotten or not been, what have we left out when trying to understand other people's experiences. I don't know what it's like to be a Black person in Vermont, but I hear a lot from friends and loved ones who are having a really tough time right now.
Thank you, Mari. Caleb Elder.
Yeah, I think that, well, the implication of the question seems to be maybe systemic racism doesn't exist because one Black person is kind of saying it doesn't. I think that's a problematic just kind of question to begin with. I don't really know how to answer it, but I'll try. I haven't read either of those individuals, but here's what I would say. It's not up to Black folks to instruct white folks in how to understand systemic racism. We got to do that work ourselves. I'm trying to do it. And I'll look those people up, I'll Google them. But if the implication is, you know, not all Black people agree about this, doesn't matter. Still exists. It's still something to work on. So that's that.
Thank you, Caleb. Harvey Smith.
Yes. I didn't really hear the question, but I assume it's on racism because that's what everybody's talking about.
You want me to repeat it, Harvey?
It's in the queue.
Well, no, I think I can handle it. You know, maybe not. I really don't know. I remember years ago we had a youngster from the Dominican Republic spend a year with us, and I could see that he was treated somewhat differently when we went out in the public. So I'm aware there's some subtle racisms around our community on a regular basis. On the other hand, I think we all need to really pay attention to how we treat others, regardless of who they are and where they are and what color their skin is. But be respectful for everyone and their opinions and their views.
Great. Thank you, Harvey. Jubilee Smith, or excuse me, Jubilee McGill. You would think I would have that name down by the time I've done it 7 times, so I apologize.
No worries. Yeah, I'm a little confused on the question as well. It sounds like this is 2 Black men who have different experiences or thoughts on systemic racism. And I think, you know, we need to listen to all affected people, but understand that everyone has different experiences, different socioeconomic class. I am married to a Black man and I am raising biracial children. So I personally am going to listen to the experience of the friends and family in my community and their thoughts on that.
Great. Thank you, Jubilee. Lynn, Dike.
Well, I think whether somebody believes there's racism and the next person doesn't, I think it's an individual thing. And I think we need to examine our own lives, our own thinking. You know, if a thought runs through our mind, we can maybe be more aware of what we're doing and what we're thinking, why we're thinking it. I hope that we will condemn it when we see it.
Thank you, Lynn. Chris Bray.
Thanks. I think what I want to distinguish between is two individuals talking about their personal perceptions, which I respect entirely, about how racism, how they see racism. But systematic racism, I think there's no doubt it exists. Just if you look at outcomes based on the color of someone's skin, there are in aggregate patterns that we can see. So shorter, less healthy lives, lower incomes, higher unemployment rates, less wealth, lower home ownership rates. We see banking practices like redlining. We see higher rates of incarceration. We see lower rates of higher education. And higher education is a doorway into a lifelong of better employment. So there are tectonic scale prejudices built into our system. And those are the things we need to address.
Thank you, Chris. Archie Flower.
Thank you, Shawn. I have read some of Thomas Sowell's work, not all of it. He is one of the most sharpest thinkers I've ever read. I have not, however, read his arguments about systemic racism, and I would be really interested in reading those because he is so articulate and he is so educated. My point of view on systemic racism is that it certainly does exist. We look at the statistics, and if memory serves, there's roughly a 10-to-1 difference in median wealth between families of whites and families of people of color. That's not income, that's wealth. So there's a definite disparity, there's a definite disconnect between treatment, and I believe that one of the nuances being lost is that systemic racism doesn't necessarily have to mean people in the system are racist. It just means the overall results are, and that's based on, the bureaucracy of that system.
Thank you, Archie. Jon Christiano.
Yes, thank you. Systemic racism. I hear this all the time. I see it in the paper. I see it here on TV. I hear it in conversations around the community. I still don't know what it is. And when I ask people, they don't have any logical explanation for how they could describe it to me. I don't, it's just baloney. I'm sorry, but, well, I'm not sorry. It's baloney. But if I talk about all lives matter or BLM matters, I'm a Christian. I believe that all lives matter. They're all, whether you're white or black, your life is important. They don't think mine is important. They think only theirs is important because they're black. I was born white. I'm not going to apologize for it, but I'm ostracized if I stand up for myself. A good example of how all this works out is Dr. Ben Carson and what he did with his life. He was black, came from a very disadvantaged background, a single mother, but he made a tremendous success out of himself because he had the opportunity that he used.
Thank you, John. Peter Briggs.
Hi, Bob. Thank you for watching. I looked at the definition of racism a couple of years back, and by definition, anybody who believes that a race is superior to another race or has advantages is a racist. By definition, if you believe the white race is superiorly advantaged in every way to the black race has been, that's a racist belief. And I'm fine with that because I believe people have a right to their own opinions and beliefs. When I have a problem with racism is when it turns into bigotry and they won't show everybody the same opportunity to prove themselves. The idea of systematic racism sometimes flies in the face of logic. I don't remember exactly what Jerome Powell was asked by a congressman or senator, but basically is the reason why blacks have either less loans or less business loans than white is because of racism, systematic racism. He says yes. And the idea that every single banker is more racist than they are greedy, and that they don't want to make loans to get interest back on that is kind of absurd. This is getting pushed in the realms of absurdity.
Thank you, Peter. And I do, I want to call on Archie Flower here. I think you have a rebuttal to a point made by one of the other candidates.
Thank you, Shawn. I would simply like to ask anyone who doesn't believe in systemic racism to explain how there is that tenfold difference in wealth and how that tracks to race.
Great. Thank you, Archie. Next question. So the last question of the evening here, this is coming from a Bristol resident, Samantha, and she asked this question. Let me just cue this up here. So the question is this, question and a comment. I'm disturbed by the local candidates who identify as Republican, given the deplorable handling of the pandemic, lack of decorum, and open disgust for empathy shown by our Republican president. Given Vermont's history of independent politicians, why affiliate with the Republican Party now? Now, granted, this would seem it's posed really to our Republican candidates, but I'm going to have all candidates at least respond to this question in your take. This question is going to start with Jon Christiano.
I believe in our president basically because his positions follow my own. I believe he promised the people of our country certain things, and when he was subsequently elected president, he followed through on them, and he gave us the promises that he made to us. And I think that was important to me. It still is. It will be in the future. I plan to support Donald Trump in whatever way I possibly can for re-election.
Thank you, Jon. Archie Flower.
Thank you, Shawn. I'm a libertarian, very proudly so, chair of the Vermont Libertarian Party, precisely because, sorry, was there crosstalk?
Yeah, sorry. Okay, we'll address that afterwards. Go ahead.
Yep. So I'm chair of the Vermont Libertarian Party precisely because I believe in libertarian values, and I can't see those being advanced in either of the major parties these days. Certainly the Vermont Republicans, I think, have it kind of tough in terms of traditional conservative values between the one hand of Phil Scott and Donald Trump on the other. But if we look at what Democrats are doing as a party, the reason we're in this mess is bipartisan. Congress plays good cop, bad cop, and I'm adding a voice for human rights, inalienable rights, equal for everyone, and actual public service rather than assuming that we should control lives.
Thank you, Archie. Peter Briggs.
Yeah, my best answer to why I'm a Republican is because I'm not a leftist. I'm also not a Keynesian. The Republican Party is rather Keynesian, but it's even less, the Democrat Party is even more Keynesian. As far as our president's rhetoric goes and things like that, I really wish the American public had the same outrage over the Hollywood rhetoric that we get. There are very few modern comedians I can stand to listen to because they are so vulgar. And I can't complain about a president that only reflects what we're seeing from Hollywood and what is supported by the rest of the country. If you really want to bring back civility, demand Hollywood goes back to standards they had before basically back in the 70s and before. That's my time period of television because it was a lot more respectful to the viewers.
Thank you, Peter. Chris Bray.
You know, my mom is who's 97, born in Brattleboro. She's a Republican, lifelong Republican. I grew up in a Republican and Democratic household. And, you know, the party has changed a great deal. I would just say that. If you think back to George Aiken, Stafford, Vermont had a lot of Republicans who I would say are far more moderate than the National Party at the moment. But more importantly, when I go to Montpelier, I raise my right hand and swear an oath of office, and that is to do the best I can for all Vermonters. I'm not interested in party. It is to do to treat equally all ideas and all people and respond to the best ideas wherever they come from. So happily in the Senate, I haven't kept track lately, but in my first 2 years, I tracked votes. We had not a single party line vote in 2 years. I'd say the Vermont Senate's alive and well.
Chris, thank you. Caleb Elder.
Thanks. Yeah, not being a Republican, I won't respond directly, but I will say that it is refreshing to be in Montpelier and have less of the kind of national animus around party be evident, especially in committee proceedings day to day. There's just a lot of non-partisanship, which is refreshing. I like it as well. You know, if I could serve in Montpelier without party affiliation, I'd be pretty tempted. I really might just go for that. It's hard when people have the choice of two parties. With all that said, the Republican Party right now, I think, needs new leadership to say the least. At the top, I do think that the president is dangerous and toxic, and I won't be voting for him. But I think that there are many Vermont Republicans I admire, and I hope that party won't stand in our way of meeting where we do agree.
Thank you, Caleb. Jubilee McGill.
This is a difficult question, I guess, to answer as a Democrat. I will, you know, I feel sorry. I've had some conversations with Republicans who are feeling really torn, kind of looking at Republican politics on a state level and then looking at Trump as the president. He's causing irreparable harm and honestly unspeakable evil to the most marginalized folks in our nation. And so I find it really problematic, but I also, you know, I can find areas where I can connect with people who are supporting them. So I think it's unfortunate that people support him and his policies. But I think as Vermonters, we have a lot more that we can work together, connect on, and have in common than any of us do with the president.
Jubilee, thank you. Lynn Dike.
Okay, well, I am a Republican. I'm a conservative, and I too, like Caleb, I kind of wish there weren't the two parties. But we have a platform that I'm very proud of. I'm proud to support it. We are, for the most part, we are pro-life, and that is a big, big difference between us and the Democratic and the Progressive Party. So there, right there is the big one for me. The values are very important to me, and I don't like the way that things are going now, and I think neither one of I just don't see how anybody can support Joe Biden either. So there you have it. We all are different, but we need to work together. We just do.
Thank you, Lynn. Mari Cordes.
As a nurse who has provided medical relief to Syrian, Iraqi, and Afghani refugees fleeing terror in their homes, and again in Matamoros, Mexico, at the border for asylum seekers also fleeing violence, and hearing their stories and seeing these children and women who are trapped there because of the Trump administration's policies, it's heartbreaking to me. More than heartbreaking, it's enraging. And there are so many other very destructive things that this president has done, including more than 200,000 lives lost to COVID. The number would have been a lot lower if he and his administration had led. I run on issues, not on party, and I am glad to say that I have enjoyed working in the State House because Republicans, progressives, and Democrats and independents do all work together, and that's been healing.
Thank you, Mari. Harvey Smith.
Yes, I have been elected as a Republican every term that I've served in the legislature. And one of the Republicans' beliefs are that we represent our constituency. And so I listen to our constituents. I make decisions based on that conversation with our constituents. It's more of a conservative view than what I see in the mainstream legislative process on the floor. We get along very, very well. We have differences of opinion, but we come up with a lot of compromises. And, there's a lot of bills coming out of the legislature that is Republicans and Democrats. So I will only speak to my role as a Republican and not get into national politics.
Yeah.
Thank you, Harvey. So now I'd like to give everybody the opportunity for closing statements. This will be 1 minute each. We'll start with the House candidates and then the Senate candidates, all in reverse order. Also, I just wanted to personally thank every one of you for putting yourself out there and the thoughtful responses. And good luck in the upcoming election. Harvey Smith is going to start us off.
Yes, I have served my community for quite a number of years of capacities, and I would like to continue that. I have a good reputation of hearing what my constituents have to say, reaching out to them, responding back to them, helping them in a wide variety of ways, some legislatively and some, just business oriented. I really appreciate their support, and I'm running for re-election again and would like to encourage them to vote for me one more time.
Great,
Thank
Harvey,
you.
thank you. Jubilee McGill.
As I said in my opening statement, I live to serve my community. I have personally dealt with many of the serious struggles facing Vermonters today, and I will bring those experiences with me to the State House. I think the best solutions arise from having all voices and all backgrounds represented and heard. We need leaders who are willing to listen and do the work necessary to foster change in our systems. I take the word representative seriously and look forward to engaging regularly with my community beyond the campaign trail. Even if we do not always see eye to eye, I will answer your calls and your emails. I want to have those discussions and make sure your concerns are heard. When we have these conversations, our communities can grow and change together. We can rise to the moment and the current crises we face. I would like to thank the sponsors for holding this event tonight and hope for your support in my campaign to bring new vision, energy, and all your voices with me to Montpelier.
Thank you, Jubilee. Caleb Elder.
Thanks everyone who's listening tonight. Thanks Shawn for moderating, and thanks to everyone who hopefully will follow a link and watch this recording in the future. It's been an honor to serve the Addison 4 district for the past 2 years, and I'd like to continue the work. I am asking for your vote to go back there, and I hope that within this biennium it will be back to the State House, because I've never had a workplace that I enjoyed commuting to more than that one. And sometimes I would stay over in Montpelier. So sometimes just walking to, which is a true pleasure for someone who lives at the end of a dirt road like me. To serve in Montpelier is an honor and puts you in kind of a historical setting while also looking towards the future. So I ask for your vote, and I'm ready to continue that work for another couple of years.
Thank you, Caleb. Lynn Dike.
Okay, well, I thank you for having this and for all having a chance to speak. It has been kind of hard for me to put my thoughts down in 1 minute to formulate what I want to say. But what I can bring to Montpelier is the ability to see the whole picture, to set some systems, make some systems, set priorities, and do the work. I have had a lot of experience in my life, 49-year nursing career, 20 years as a military spouse, mother, grandmother, Christian, working in my church, and opening my home to others. And I really would like the chance to serve you in Montpelier. So I would like your vote.
Thank you, Lynn. Mari Cordes.
I was raised by two moms to be strong and independent. And though I don't always agree with all constituents, I still bring everyone's voices to the State House. I'm proud of the work that we've done together as a community. It was also heartbreaking, though an honor, to be able to help so many in our community with unemployment and pandemic unemployment assistance problems and many other pandemic issues. I believe that we can all have hope for a better future. The next 6 months to a year are going to be challenging as we face further financial fallout. But from what we've seen in the first days of the pandemic, we do have resilience. We do know how to help each other. We can energize our villages and we can protect our forests. I will continue to fight for a Vermont and a planet for all of us.
Thank you, Mari. Archie Flower.
Thank you again, Shawn, and thank you everyone who has attended this forum. I will simply say this: if you want something different in Montpelier, you're going to have to vote different.
Yeah.
The bipartisan results that we see in this state and we see around the nation are a result of politics as usual. Just the R's and the D's going back and forth. If you want a true and fierce fighter for a voice of limited government that serves the people and protects your rights, please vote for Archie Flower. Thank you.
Thank you, Archie. Jon Christiano.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to enter into the race. I did enter late to offer Republicans in Addison County a second choice. In conjunction with Peter Briggs, I took a role in that regard. I pledged to represent everyone. I would listen not only to my Republican brothers and neighbors, sisters, but Democrats as well. It is a collective enterprise. I would ask that you would vote for me and for change in Montpelier. When I take my oath of office, it would include the following: a strong representation of the Constitution, and that means gun rights and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thank you.
Thank you, Jon. Peter Briggs.
Running for a while, and every election cycle we keep talking about the same issues. There's been a lot of imbalance in Montpelier toward one side. So if you want changes that will bring about different solutions to these problems that will likely fix them, I encourage you to vote for Jon and myself. I spend a lot of time in my personal research trying to understand and find answers to these problems. And I'm confident that I am finding the correct answers. Also, one thing I can guarantee that I can bring to you is not knowledge limited by being an expert in any one area. I'm just a common guy, so I know what hurts the common people. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Chris Bray.
I want to thank the Chamber for supporting tonight's event, the citizens of Addison County watching at home, and to my fellow candidates. Democracy thrives with participation. In my time in office, I've had literally tens of thousands of communications with you all, some in person, some on the phone, some by email. And I appreciate every one of those conversations because I've learned a great deal from you about the issues, what we're doing well, and what we can improve. I know that we all want a stronger economy, not just any economy, but one that plays to our unique strengths here in Addison County and Vermont more generally. That's why I've spent a decade building farm to plate. That's why I've been a champion of our clean energy economy. That's why I've worked so hard on clean water. There's an old expression, well begun is half done. The programs I've just cited are well begun, and there's more that we can do in the world of farming, food, forestry, clean energy, and clean water. There's a brighter, healthier future for all of us ahead. I ask for your continued support and your vote this election. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you all for those closing statements. And we do have some departing words as well, but I'm going to leave those up to Rob Carter. Rob?
Great, thanks, and good evening. I'm Rob Carter. I'm the president of the Addison County Chamber of Commerce. This concludes the 2020 Addison County Legislative Candidate Forum for the Bristol area, brought to you in partnership with the Addison County Economic Development Corporation. I'd like to again thank our media sponsor, the Addison Independent, as well as all of the candidates and local residents who've joined us. Thanks also to our moderator, Shawn, who did a great job. We appreciate that. The recording of this forum will be available on the Chamber of Commerce website by the end of the week at www.addisoncounty.com and the Economic Development website at www.addisoncountyedc.org. In the near future, also will be on NEAT, the local Bristol TV station. If you'd like to attend the legislative forum for the Virgins area, you can sign up at the Chamber website. Thanks again, and have a good night.
Thank you, Rob, Shawn, Sarah.
Thank you.
And Fred. Thank you, Fred.
Thanks.
Good night, everyone.
Thank
Be
you.
well.
Bye. Good night.
Ciao.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.